The Sage Accpac ERP scheduling feature allows you to set up reminders for your recurring transactions and process them with a single click. In this tutorial, we'll walk you through an example where we'll set up this feature for our monthly office rent payment. There are two main steps for setting up our example. First, we'll create a schedule in Common Services. Then we'll set up a recurring transaction in Accounts Payable and associate it with the schedule we created. So now let's jump right in and get started by setting up a schedule. To do this, we'll go to Common Services, Scheduling, and open Schedules. Here we'll enter a schedule code. In this example, we'll use a code that identifies the payables transaction and the initials of the responsible clerk. So we'll enter rent, followed by the clerk's initials RB. Next, we'll enter a relevant description, monthly rent. Moving to the user mode. Here you can select no users, a specific user, or all users, and we'll choose specific user. And clicking on the finder, we'll select our AP clerk, Roger Brown. The Remind in Advance field allows us to set the reminder pop-up one or more days in advance of the transaction date. Let's leave this as 0 or Z. We also need to set a start date, and in this case, we'll go with the default. And since this schedule is for our office rent, we'll choose monthly for the recurring periods. For the frequency, we want to select the last day of the month for our reminder. Importantly, we're selecting last rather than 31st since not all months have 31 days. Now we'll click Add and close the window. At this point, we're ready for the second step, which is to create the recurring transaction in the subledger where the transaction will originate. Since this example is for our monthly rent transaction, we'll go to Accounts Payable, AP Vendors, Recurring Payables. Here we'll create the rent transaction. First, we'll add a new code called Rent. Moving to the Vendor field, we'll use the finder to locate our vendor, Decca Management, which we'll type into the Contains field and hit the Select button. The Schedule Code field is where we'll link this recurring transaction to a schedule. And using the finder, we'll select the Rent RB monthly rent code that we created earlier. Next, we'll enter a start date from when the recurring payable should become effective. And since we want the first transaction to occur on the last day of the current month, we can leave the default date as is. And for expiration type, you have several choices: no expiration, specific date, maximum amount, and number of invoices. For our example, we'll select no expiration. Now we'll move to the Details tab. Because our vendor, Decca Management, is associated with a distribution code, you can see that the applicable GL account is automatically entered here, and all we need to do is enter the monthly recurring amount, which will be $3,000. Now we'll click Add to save the new recurring transaction and close the screen. And with that, we've completed setup of the recurring rent transaction and its reminder. So now it's time to test our work. We'll need to log out by closing the company and log back in as the clerk for whom we've set the reminder. So we'll enter Roger B in the User ID field. Since we set our reminder to appear on the last day of each month, we'll need to change our session date to 6/30/2020 in order for the reminder to appear. And now we'll click OK. And there's our reminder. After a quick review, a single click processes the scheduled transaction. Note that you can also use the scheduling and reminder feature for recurring accounts receivable and general ledger transactions. So to recap, in Sage Accpac ERP, you can automate reminders and processing of your recurring transactions using the scheduling and recurring transactions features. Give us a call if you need assistance with this or any other feature in your Sage Accpac ERP system. Well, that's it for this tutorial. Bye for now.